need that reminder often, don't we, that in the stillness there's peace. In the silence we can find that peace. So good morning. Let's just continue to breathe into that space together. Take a deep breath with me. Yes. So I was reminded recently of a Sufi story. A woman takes her son to her teacher, her sheikh, and she sits with her teacher for guidance, and she's gone there specifically to have her teacher, her sheikh, convey to her son how important it is to stop eating so much sugar. He's a kid being a kid, and he's addicted to sugar, she says. Please tell him to stop eating it, that it's not healthy, that he needs to take a break, he needs to not eat so much sugar. Please tell him. And instead the sheikh looks to the woman and says, come back and see me in 2 weeks. And she's like, okay, right? So she leaves. She comes back in 2 weeks, sits down before the sheikh. He immediately turns to the son and says, son, you need to stop eating so much sugar. It's not good for you. And she's like, no disrespect, but why couldn't you have just said that 2 weeks ago? And he said, because I needed to practice in order to know. In other words, I had to go home and stop eating sugar myself, because I too love sugar. I had to stop eating sugar so I could see what it felt like, so I could be in tune with that, in touch with that. I had to practice what I teach. I had to practice what I know. And I love that story, and it reminds me, I was reminded of it recently because sometimes we need a minute, right? Sometimes we need a minute to put into practice the truth that we know. Because we can know a thing in our head, we can intellectually know, for example, that life is eternal, that love is eternal. We can know that. We can know that there's good in everything, that in all things is good is God. We can know that. But when something affects us really personally, really deeply, sometimes we need a minute to allow that alignment, that putting into practice of the intellectual and the heart, the feeling, the head and the heart coming together. I mentioned last week about two friends that were dear people, Karen and Dan, and how they had passed on, and even told the story about the marbles and the importance of living so mindfully of every day. And then right after that, my dear friend, someone who's like family to me, Stephen Phillips, passed away. And I couldn't talk about that last week. I could talk about Dan and Karen, and I could talk about it. I was already planning to talk about them. I could talk about that, but I couldn't talk about Stephen yet. I knew intellectually that, yes, that pain breaks our heart open and leaves us room to grow and room to look for blessings. And I knew all the things that we tell each other, right? When really what we want to hear in times like that is, I hear you, and I'm here for you. And so anyway, I needed a minute to allow myself to feel the pain and the grief, and I'm still allowing that. There's no statute of limitations on grief, so I'm still allowing myself to feel that and to honor that. Because if we don't honor it, it's a spiritual bypass. If we don't honor the pain and put into practice, take our time putting into practice the truth, the intellectual truth that we know about this thing called life, putting that together and allowing it to be in alignment with our feeling nature. If we don't do that, then we're doing what Ernest Holmes called too much wishbone and too little backbone, right? Not putting it into practice in our lives. So sometimes we need a minute to do that. I love the reading today from Science Mind magazine reminding us that the nature of God is unity. The nature of God is unity, a coming together, a oneness, a wholeness. The nature of God is unity, and therefore my natural essence is also unity. That's what it says. So it reminds me of the last couple of weeks and the talks. A couple of weeks ago when Karen was with us, I talked a lot about community and how we're all each other's angels, and we only have one wing, and we lift each other up so we can fly. And I started thinking about other words that have the word unity in them. So we have community, and then last week I talked about soul immunity. And that's a coming together in such a way that you're resistant to toxins. And I talked about how we can have that soul immunity when we release the toxins of the whisperings of not good enough, the whisperings of separateness, the whisperings of anything other than this divine pattern at the center of life. And so Let's talk about another word then that has the word unity in it. This wholeness of life, this oneness, seeing the divine in all things, capital A-L-L, all things, right? We talked about that. We talk about that a lot, how we say that the omnipresence of the divine, right? We talk about that, meaning that this divine presence, this intelligence, this love is in everything. But do we always put that really together and align it and allow ourselves to see and to feel it in all things, to trust that it is in all things? So let's talk about the word opportunity. Has the word unity in it. Opportunity, really thinking about that, it's just circumstances that lead to possibility. And that, again, brings me to a part 2 of last week's story of Melissa, one little piece I forgot to mention that speaks to opportunity and possibilities. So our dear friend Melissa Summerlin, that I was bragging on last week with permission, sharing her stories, she talked to me, and she said, a short while back, and said that she had picked out a house. She sent pictures. I was already planning the party that we were going to have, welcoming her into her space. I was thinking of a party we would have. And then she calls the next day, or maybe even later that day, and said, they sold it to someone else. I didn't get the house. And I said, this or something greater. This or something greater. Opportunity, coming together for possibility. This or something greater. The next day she let me know that she got something greater. She actually was able to is designing a house. She actually leaned into a different way and got something even better and is designing her own home. So unity, coming together, seeing that wholeness of life. We see it in community, we see it in immunity, we see it in opportunity, and we see it in importunity. importunity, importunity. And that is the persistence. They even say, it's even called the persistence to the point of annoyance, right? That staying the course, you're going to stay on that, staying the course. Not forsaking principle for circumstance, not saying, well, it's true that the divine is in everything, but not this pain that I'm feeling. There's none of it here. Refusing to see that. When my dad passed away, as a matter of fact, last week was the 16th anniversary of his death, and it's still hard to believe he's gone from this plane. And I remember when he passed away, and the thought, if someone had even dared to mention that somehow there would be good in that situation for me, I definitely would have been very upset. I was so rocked and just to my core over him passing. I had no idea the things that would come in my life from not only the way he lived, but the fact that he was no longer here in person anymore. I literally became a minister because of his passing. Not directly per se, but actually I believe it was very, very instrumental in me becoming and taking this path. And so many other really great things happened as a result of a change of course due to that loss. And now I think about Stephen and how he lived his life just in so much love and gratitude, and how I go back to last week's story about the marbles, and really, and if you didn't hear that, you need to go back and listen to that talk, because I'm not going to tell that story again, but it's about recognizing the sacredness of every single day. And so I think about how he lived, and now that he's not here, and remembering and really choosing to commit to being so mindful like he was. I'm going to tell you more about that in just a minute, about how he was. But first, I'll tell you something that changed him. And I mean, he was always a person that was fun to be around. He was hysterical. Actually, he was quite the Southern diva, and he would say the funniest things. I remember when he used to say. Well, bless his heart, I'm not sure his cornbread's done all the way to the middle. Or he would say, Christy Sue, darling, I just love you. Love you, love you, love you, love you. Right? This is a very loving, funny, generous, genuine soul. But let me tell you a little something that shifted and took him even deeper into leaning in to life with love and gratitude. And that was about 10 years ago. He had a catastrophic heart attack, the kind you don't recover from most of the time. Most people die from that sort of heart attack that he had. And well, this is a two-part story, so I'm going to talk about how it affected Stephen, but I also want to talk about so another piece to that. So it's a story within a story, so bear with me. So we have this catastrophic heart attack, but let me back up and tell you about how that unfolded. So here he is in New Orleans, where he lived part of the time with his partner in good, his best friend and previous husband, Jack Fowler. And so he had been down there in New Orleans. He was driving back to Bay Minette, where he worked in a sweet little hair salon, Maryland's. They shout out to Maryland's. They love that man, and he loved them. So he was on his way back, and all of a sudden he felt he was having a heart attack, and he called Jack, but he couldn't reach Jack, and here he is having a heart attack on the side of Highway 10, and he can't reach Jack, and so then let's hold that thought for a second. Now here we are with Jack in the middle of the French Quarter. If you've ever been in the French Quarter, you understand that hearing your phone is not something that's probably going to happen, especially if it's in your pocket. So it was loud. There's always music and people, and it's just really, really loud. But Jack felt like he needed to look at his phone. So he pulls his phone out right at the moment that Stephen had just called. He sees the missed call from Stephen, thinks, well, that's weird. He just left. Why would he be calling? Calls him back, and all Stephen can get out is bridge. And then he loses the call. I think he lost consciousness at that point. So all Jack knows is something is bad wrong, and he's on the bridge because he knows the route he's taking. He's able to call 911 and say, get to the Highway 10 eastbound bridge just out of New Orleans. A man is having a life-altering event. I'm not sure if it's a stroke or a heart attack. I don't know what has happened, or a car wreck, but something is wrong, and it's life-threatening. Get there as soon as you can. I get cold chills telling the story because the hospital later said that that phone call saved Stephen's life and gave him 10 bonus years. Well, he didn't know 10 at the time, but he always used to say, these are my bonus years. Because of Jack's call, he made it to the hospital, which happened to be one of the top hospitals in the country for the type of heart surgery that he needed to have, and it saved his life. Why? Because Jack lived in such a way that he was centered and grounded and in tune with his intuition. That's a very basic, perfect example of how being tuned in to our intuition is actually practical and important in this life. Him taking the time every day to do his meditation, to be open, to be centered, to be grounded, led him to be open to his intuition, to pick up his phone and look at it, make a phone call at just the right time, right? And so then fast forward a couple of years after the heart attack, Renee Laboa, she said that we both saw him at a conference, and he was looking great. He'd lost weight, he was active, and he was healing, and he was doing great. And she said, what do you think feels most changed about you since the heart attack? And he said, I live every moment as if it were my last. I live every moment as if it were my last. And I can tell you, he lived those moments with absolute love and gratitude. I'm able to talk about it today. Yesterday I was not able to. Tomorrow I may not be able to. And that's part of the grieving process too. I had to make the decision, am I okay to talk about this today? Because I miss my friend very much. And sometimes just bringing up his name, the floodgates are open. But we have to honor that. That's part of our spiritual practice too. That's part of our spiritual process. Not to bypass, pardon me, not to bypass our emotions, but to integrate, to align them with what we know in our intellect, with what we feel in our heart, so that we can lean into life. There's nothing that we can go through that leaning into life with love and gratitude won't make better. That will absolutely improve any situation, leaning into it with love and gratitude. And that's how he lived his life. And I'm so grateful for this beautiful soul. And so what happens, though, when we lose sight? When I was in the bed for 2 days sobbing after he passed. And full disclosure, I may be again, so it's okay. But what happens when we lose sight? When we lose sight of the fact that there's God in all things? What happens when we lose the feeling of feeling connected to the unity of life, right? To that spiritual truth of oneness? We go to the mountain. For me, that was literal. I went to the mountain. I told Angie, I was like, we need an adventure. And so we went to a place that's near and dear to my heart. It's a place right above where I grew up, up in the Blue Ridge Mountains off the Parkway. It's called Doughton Park. Beautiful fields of wildflowers. You can walk on grass paths and sit on huge rocks and just be in nature. Smell the nature. It's good for your soul. So I literally needed to go to the mountain. So what is it for you that when you lose sight, when you lose feeling of the oneness and the love and the intelligence and the order amidst the chaos, what is it for you that takes you back to a centered place? That's the question you need to ask yourself so that you can put it into practice when you need it. Nature is a huge one for me, and I know I say it almost every Sunday because it's so vital for our well-being. And so there's also going to the mountain in consciousness, figuratively, right? I was talking about this and I said, wow, it took going to the mountain for me to get back to center. And then I thought, like Moses had to go to the mountain. Not that I'm Moses, but like Moses, we're all Moses. We all have our Moses moments. Like Moses, he went to the mountaintop to get closer to God. But really, metaphysically, if we look at the mountain, it's really just that higher state of consciousness, that self-realization place. When we look at Moses, the metaphysical interpretations of just his life, his name, even just his name, there's a lot to look at. It means to draw out. It was one of my favorite stories as a kid, how he was drawn out of the water and saved. And so when you think about his name being drawn out, then he was responsible for drawing out the Israelites out of bondage, right? And leading them to the promised land. Well, metaphysically, we can look at that and see how that we have the opportunity to be our own Moses figure, to draw out our thoughts, to draw our thoughts from a place of bondage, a place of negativity, into a place of possibility, which is the promised land, to draw them out, to draw our life out of darkness into the light. Of course, then we think about that story and what happened to them. They went through a lot of wilderness to get to the promised land, right? So we have to understand that too when we feel we're in the weeds, when we feel we're in the wilderness. That's okay. That's when we have to be engaging with that tireless, unconditional trust. Pardon me. We have to persist and keep going. Persist and keep going. And then also, what about the way that we can identify with the Moses quality of self-doubt, right? So when he heard God speak to him and say, go and lead my people out of bondage, he's like, well, wait, what? No, you got the wrong guy. You seriously got the wrong guy. I mean, I'm not the best speaker. It's not me. You called the wrong number. So how many times have we felt that we just didn't quite think we were up for the task, whether it was facing a painful situation, facing a transition in our life, facing COVID-19, facing whatever the case may be. But if it's brought to you, it's brought for you to move through you. So whatever is coming to you is for you to move through you. And so just like Moses moving from self-doubt to confidence in the one that sent me, I am that I am has sent me. That I am presence is in all of us, moving us through life, helping us to align with the truth that we know and the truth that we know from head to heart, helping us to tirelessly persist, keep going, keep surrendering to the truth that we know, tirelessly relying upon spiritual truth, the spiritual truth of non-duality, that spiritual truth of oneness that takes us to the higher plane of consciousness. I just spelled trust, by the way, and that's what it takes. That's what it takes to see the all, the capital all, to see the divine in all takes trust, tirelessly relying upon spiritual truth. Tirelessly relying upon spiritual truth, the spiritual truth of oneness, that non-duality, leaning into life with love and gratitude regardless of the circumstance. And sometimes, we need help doing that, and that's okay. Sometimes we need time to do that, and that's okay. Renee has a song that she sings that was written by a mutual friend, Mel White, and that song has brought me back to a centered place more times than I can count. It's called All Is Well, and it says, safe and still, the chatter can cease. All is well. Remember last week I talked about the chatter, the whispering, the negative whisperings of ourself and others. So the chatter can cease, all is well. Warm, free from the chill. My heart is at peace, all is well. I can take my fears and let them go. Surrounded by the glow of love, right here, right now. We're surrounded by the glow of love right here, right now, and always, and in capital all ways. The nature of God is unity. Therefore, my essential nature is unity. I embrace life, all of it. Even this frog in my throat. I welcome life, all of it. I move into a deep acceptance of life. We can trust life. We can trust that as we tirelessly rely upon spiritual truth, our unity with all of life, that we feel that center. We feel ourselves back to an alignment with what we know. We lean in with love. We look at life and we say, this is a precious place. This is a precious moment. This is a precious place. This bodysuit that I'm in, I will treat it with love and respect, and I will treat those I see with love and respect. I will lean into life with absolute, deep, abiding love and gratitude. Thank you, Stephen Phillips, for blessing my life. I love you. I love all of you. Namaste.